Teachers of Reddit, what former students of yours are now famous or infamous, and did you foresee their outcome while students of yours? My current boss is my ex-student. I told him he should stay on at university and do a PhD. He didn't, but rapidly climbed the ladder of my organization and now decides what I do. He's a bright kid. It's the best feeling when your student achieves. I wouldn't say infamous, but one of my students is a model at fetish conventions and has a website where people can buy clips of her having sex with men and women, sometimes while using a strap-on. She also does some cosplay at comic cons. And no, I did not foresee that outcome. Edit, Miss Jaya Love. My old boss was a high school English teacher and had John Mayer as his student. Despite Mayer's well-known dickishness, my boss was quite friendly with his parents and as a musician himself, he shared a lot of his own songs and CDs to them. And then John Mayer used one of his album covers for his own without permission, so he hates him, and I remember he always switched the Spotify channel if John Mayer's song came on at his bar. My Latin teacher taught Fred West, one of the UK's most notorious serial killers and child murderers. He said he was always shit at Latin but gave no particularly bad warning signs. Is this the Fred West who put body parts in the wall in Western Superbar? Or am I getting my serial killers mixed up? You've got them mixed up. Fred is one of the Moore's murderers. Him and Rosemary killed some kids. Actually, a teacher I have had students go on to do important things that make me very proud that Reddit would probably not care about very much. An important human rights lawyer. Another person who is working on a team making breakthroughs in some kind of random bacteriology studies lol. The most exciting for most people would probably be teaching a football player who went on to play for an NFL team. And yes, I occasionally watch his games and wait to hear his name. I feel all warm and fuzzy when I see my former students do great things and brag about them on Facebook and stuff. I taught two brothers in middle school. I can remember their father coming to school and threatening to beat up a teacher that he claimed was bullying one of them, giving a demerit. A few years later, one is in jail for accessory to killing a police officer and the other for trafficking heroin. Sheet apples. My grandma taught Darius Smiles, former NBA player. She said he wasn't the sharpest crayon in the box. When I was in elementary school, he used to stop by the school quite a bit and everyone flipped out over his fancy car. My grandfather taught history to Kate and Pippa Middleton. I think he said they were nice girls. I used to think Benedict Cumberbatch was the most British name. But Pippa, just Pippa, beats it. Not a teacher, but a kid I went to school with became a serial bank robber. He was caught robbing a convenience store in high school. And when he was free, he moved on to bigger fish. Chance the Rapper went to my school, Chicago City College, and dropped out because he got famous lots of money. I had a creative writing professor last semester who is still pissed off at him because he dropped. I'm like, who the duck would stay here at a 2-year college instead of signing a ducking record deal? But yeah, proof is still bent and gets irritated when talking about it. Lol. Edit, took out the word sign because Chance didn't sign sheet. My bad. My brother teaches in Springfield, Ohio, and had John Legend in middle school. Brother says he won the talent show that year. I had a kid who was super smart, but came from a rough family and neighborhood, not Springfield. Oh. Lots of gang activity. The kid had two paths to choose from, academia or neighborhood. He chose the neighborhood and is now in prison for murder. Unfortunately, we saw it coming. Did our best to steer him towards using his smarts to break the cycle. But it didn't work. It's been about 10 years now and still breaks my heart. Went to high school with Rudy Gay, NBA player now. About the nicest guy in the world. Very soft spoken and shy at the time. But we were all thrilled with his personal success. Everyone knew he was NBA bound. But it didn't seem to affect anything as far as his treatment. His family was extremely nice as well. One of my friends had Rudy sign his birthday card and he said he was going to keep it and auction it off one day when Rudy was famous. Wonder if he did. I am a teacher, but I'm too young for my students to have gotten famous yet. I did apparently go to school with Brian Selva, the grad tattoo guy from Vine. And he was about as much of a D-bag as you'd expect. I'm a teacher at an alternative school and this student is famous in our town. Although for a terrible reason. Some of my students are there to catch up on credits or graduate faster due to having a baby. Some are there because they are legitimate monsters who should not be at a normal school site. These are students who have shot people, stolen cars, sold hard drugs and even pimped girls. One of my students, who I will call Ryan, because he might one day find out that I told his story on Reddit, is someone who I thought would end up being at best a deadbeat dad. He told me one day that he had gotten a girl on campus pregnant and it was true. I was very sad about it because I knew that baby was going to grow up in a neglectful, abusive household. Well, one day Ryan isn't in class and I asked my students if any of them knew where he was. Turns out he was in jail. He had lured an autistic student out into a nearby park and beat him nearly to death. He videotaped the entire thing and apparently thought it was hilarious. Eventually he was tested for STDs in jail and it came out that he had 5. Well, he is going to go on trial and will most likely spend the next decade or 2 in prison for attempted murder. So yeah, that's about what I expected of him. But I didn't think it would take him as little time as it did to get there. I taught a Sapiens. I had no idea how far he went in life until I saw his obituary. I was heartbroken. I would have loved to have been able to congratulate him and cheer him on. By the time I knew it was too late. A teacher now. But back when I was a practicum student, there was a girl who was insanely talented at dirt bike racing. After she graduated from high school, she became a professional dirt biker. She's since then changed gears to something new. I don't know what's going on in this thread, but I literally recognize none of the famous people names in here. I'm half convinced people are just making up names here. I taught Alexis Capri Anderson when she was in high school. She was a nice enough kid, but had some indications of a rough home life and maybe drug problems. She went on to become a porn star who also happened to lock herself or get locked in a bathroom in a Renoir hotel room while a coked out Charlie Sheen wrecked the sheet out of the place. I think he later sued her for extortion or something. I went to high school with Jamal Adams, who was the 6th overall pick in the 2017 NFL draft. We also ran track together. He was extremely entitled and got away with doing anything he wanted. Football players in Texas high schools are basically given God status, especially when they are good. On several occasions, he got caught cheating on tests with absolutely no repercussions. If it were any other student, they would have automatically failed the class, and every member of the faculty would have been notified about the incident through email. He also never showed up to track practice on time, usually showing up with fast food whenever he arrived. Our school didn't have off-campus lunch when I went there, so he would just leave campus knowing that he could get away with it. The coaches never questioned it if you weren't friends with him. He was notoriously a jerk. His dad, who was also an NFL player, is also a complete douche and asshole. But that's a completely different post for a different day. When Jamal was first drafted, there were several articles about the whole father-son and how they had humble beginnings and all that crap. I could never take those articles seriously knowing how both of them are in real life. I'm a student and a kid I grew up going to school with got drafted to the NHL last year in the first round. In careers class, when asked what he wanted to do, he said pro hockey player, and the teacher just laughed and kinda pushed it aside. Good on him for proving her wrong, but he's pretty stupid, so without hockey he didn't have much else going for him, so it's good he's making it. Not a teacher, but Macklemore. Ben Haggerty was a classmate of mine in high school. He seemed exactly like every other burnout, skipping class to mill around outside and smoke. I'm gonna be a rapper is a super common dream among the multitude of dropout losers of America. It's right up there with I'm going to play basketball, football, and needless to say, most don't make it. When he dropped out and fell to Drew Gus, like so many others, it surprised nobody. Then he turned it all around and became super successful. I guess it helps that he wasn't actually as disadvantaged growing up as the rest of the dropouts. A student introduced me to Vivian Susu when I was teaching ESL in Taipei. She'd sit in on our one-to-one classes. She was gorgeous and funny. I knew Vivian was taking acting lessons, but I didn't expect she'd go on to become an international star. Someone I had a few classes with in high school ended up becoming one of the top Viners. I remember him saying he was fat for a while, and when I knew him he had lost weight. Because of the transition I feel like he was kind of shy and didn't have a lot of confidence. It surprised me when I heard, but I was glad he got somewhere important. Almost immediately after I found out, I ran into him at the mall. I didn't want to come off as a fan or try to reconnect only because of his fame, so him and I just awkwardly passed each other. I wish I stopped to say hi and congratulate him now that I think back. My dad, who passed away last fall, was a high school teacher in the Minneapolis school district for over 25 years. He had Prince as a student for one term. When I asked what he was like, my dad said he was short and quiet. We had this conversation before Prince became a megastar, so it wasn't a big deal at the time. I never asked about it again. Probably should have. A friend's mother was a high school teacher here where Canadian singer-composer Bryan Adams grew up and taught him in high school. There are lots of local folklore about him, but one thing stood out to me that she told me: he sat around in the halls a lot, playing an acoustic guitar, getting stoned and telling everyone he was going to be famous someday. That last part is what gets me. We all know a kid like that from high school, who reassured everyone he was going places as he sat around, doing nothing, being a procrastinator, and playing a guitar. Turns out, sometimes hard work isn't what gets you famous. Maybe sometimes it's just raw talent. Say whatever you want about Bryan Adams if you feel like it, but the man is a killer songwriter and arranger. It's not an easy skill to master or be good at. Not a teacher, but I went to school with Daryl Robert Kenny, Medeha, and his siblings. The sister of Randy Schoenwetter, attempted child rapist turned Medeha. And my brother and I were bullied by Curtis and Kathy Jones, Medehas, from our school. They all went to the same church youth group at some point, along with another guy I went to church with in my religious days, who ended up on to catch a predator. That church school was ducked. All from Brevard County, Florida, if anyone googles these folks. I taught a kid who always insisted that he would be professionally doing something involving pro football. Brilliant kid. But what were his odds? Apparently good, because he does scouting for a pro team. I had another student who I introduced to nuclear physics, of super basic, mostly fission equals big book, who is now studying to be a nuclear engineer. Not famous yet, but I have faith. My social studies teacher taught Raven Simone, and my teacher ended up calling Raven to come visit our school and we all got to meet her. She even spent extra time with us during our social studies class. It was kind of great meeting my favorite actor growing up. She was also super nice. I subbed in Compton the same time Kendrick Lamar was in elementary school. I can only say I subbed at the school he attended, so I don't know if I actually taught him, but my son thinks it's pretty cool. Always good to get dad points. Went to school with a certain ginger singer. He was always in the music rooms during our breaks, and I can remember him performing at a Christmas assembly. He was very good, but never would have guessed he would be as big as he is today. Former teacher. A student of mine was featured briefly on American Idol. The school made a big deal about it. I honestly never saw it coming. He used to make fun of guys that didn't act masculine enough. Go figure. In undergrad I did some student teaching, and one of my students was a charismatic, handsome, funny kid who was majoring in drama. If you told me he'd be a famous actor 15 years down the road, I wouldn't have been surprised. Turns out it was his quiet, nerdy friend, also in my class, whose indie rock band ended up going huge after college. Guy's their lead singer and is hands down the most famous one of my Facebook friends. Talk shows, red carpets, world tours, charting albums, viral hit singles, the works. Never saw that coming. No idea what the actor kid is doing these days. I went to a high school near where Eddie Lacy, NFL player, went. He was an absolute freak of nature in HS. So much stronger and faster than everybody. Our team played his a couple times and he scored every time his hands touches the ball. Absolutely demolished us single-handedly. It was like a bunch of kids playing tackle football with Thor. The nicest guy on the planet. If he stiff-armed someone into the shadow realm or trucked them into the turf, he would be the first person after the play to make sure they were okay. He didn't showboat or anything. Just played the game and loved it. I was super excited to see him do so well on the puckers for a little while. Dude had elite hands. I hope he can figure it out again. So much fun to watch. My high school history teacher had Stephen Yeun from The Walking Dead in his class. He said that Stephen was a nice and easygoing, yet also quiet student. He really liked reading manga and would talk about it whenever he got free time. He was also a good student. My wife taught Demetrios Pagurtsis in 5th grade. By her memory he was an odd but very sweet and well-liked kid. This whole thing has got her really shook up and confused. She says there are kids who wouldn't be surprised to do this sort of thing. But Demetrios wasn't one of those kids. The whole thing has been a mind duck for her. Especially because 2 other former students of hers were killed. As well as the older sibling of a current student. One of former students, who was killed. She described as one of her favorite students she's taught. A very bright kid who she felt was going places. Just sad all around. I'm a teacher and coach. Coached this kid but never had him in class. Good football player. Student and all around kid. Went to a Division II school to play football and was in pre-med. Turns out he became a serial bank robber. Hit 20 plus banks in a 3-year period. I had moved out of state and lost touch with him, so I don't know what drove him to do that. It seemed like he had so much going for him. He pleaded guilty and I think is doing 15-20 years. Not a teacher. But I took a class in college with Nathan Griffith, who dated and had a kid with Janelle Evans from Teen Mom 2. I know next to nothing about the dude besides the fact that he has been arrested a bunch of times. He was always pretty cool in the class we had. He asked lots of questions and generally tried, as far as I could tell. He would talk to everyone before the class would start and was a pretty social dude. He also never brought up the fact that he was on Teen Mom or involved in any of that stuff. I had no idea for the first week or so and only found out from the girls who sat near me who were gossiping about it and then decided to look him up. One of my former athletes who was a student where I taught barged into my room the very first day of school, my first day teaching, and asked me when we'd be going on a date. I was obviously flustered and upset as he was 18 and I was only 23 and didn't want my reputation tarnished. Fast forward to 3 years later and he and another student murdered a girl and her unborn child. He is now on death row. I was surprised a little at first but have grown less shocked as time has gone on. He exhibited plenty of erratic behavior. But as a teacher we always hope our students grow up and learn to deal with their problems in a calm and appropriate manner. I'm an elementary music teacher. Several years ago I had a very talented little singer in my school who was always talking about go-kart racing. In fact, she often missed school to travel in a kart racing circuit. I always hoped she would pursue music because truly, she really was that musically gifted. Fast forward several years, and you might recognize her as Sarah Fisher, indie race car driver and owner of Speedway Indoor Karting.